Every one of us has mental beliefs, things we think we have to live up to, of which some limits our ability as leaders. If you don't think you have one, well, I guess that's a mental pitfall in itself. Today's guest speaker is the fabulous Ola Ljungren Bergeå, a developer of leadership and culture. He's a consultant at Real 8 in Stockholm. Ola is also the author of the book Make It Easy, a handbook in leadership with tips and advice on how to increase engagement in the work of continuous improvement. It's currently, however, only available in Swedish. If you enjoy the videos here on this channel and want to support my work of creating free educational content here on YouTube, please consider becoming a Patreon. Link in the description below if you want to know more. Enough of the prologue stuff. Ola, the screen is yours.
Thanks, Jimmy. Very, very happy to be here. It's very good to be invited to talk about these very important things to me, because limitations are something they're very unnecessary. So what I'm going to talk about today is, I call it Don't Limit Yourself as a Leader. I'm going to talk about 8 limiting beliefs that you, well, basically just should let go of. Because we are full of limiting beliefs, and that's part of being human. And we learn to identify a lot of different patterns of cause and effect during life. And some of these patterns, even though they might have been relevant at the time, they're not relevant anymore, and they just don't hold in the large picture. And these patterns are what I call mental rackets, or simply limiting beliefs. Still, we don't really reflect on these beliefs and question them as often as we should do. But the thing is, if you want to succeed as a leader, you really should. You really should reflect on those patterns, and you should reflect constantly on your thoughts in order to succeed. And in my experience as a coach, I've been working for years as a leadership coach, and I've encountered a number of different thoughts in us, in all kind of leaders, in all kind of organizations, and they hold these thoughts very dearly. But in fact, they're nothing more than limiting beliefs. So the whole intention of this talk is actually to make you a tiny bit more aware of these beliefs. And I want you to pay attention to when these thoughts come to mind, so that you can identify them as what they are, probably being limiting beliefs. So here goes the first one. The first one is called I need more structure. And this actually is one of the most common limiting beliefs when we are facing problems of different kinds. It could be typically too much work, or quality issues, or bad alignment around goals and objectives, or whatever. We tend to call for more structure. I suppose you recognize this. For instance, when we get too much to do, our go-to behavior typically tells us with some structure we'll be able to get it all done. And then we start planning and we start organizing. But someone once told me this, and I think it's a very good thing to remember. Restructuring and reorganizing usually is basically like shuffling around the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. And what you need instead is someone climbing up the mast, who tells you if there's an iceberg coming your way. Often the question is not about getting things done. It's about getting the right things done, okay? And that demands a different perspective. So what that demands is reflection. And perhaps most important of all, it demands the strength to prioritize and to say no. And that's a mental strength. So paradoxically, instead of jumping to organizing things when the pressure is on, take your time to sit back, reflect, and find out what's most important and meaningful in what you do. That's number one. And what about the second one? Well, it's called If I Only Had, X. And X is it could be basically anything. When faced with a problem, we tend to look at things that we don't have instead of what we have. So we seek answers outside of ourselves and outside our environment, because often we spend a lot of time and energy trying to find knowledge, people and tools and equipments and what have you, hoping for a silver bullet, to solve things, and that will help us through. But in my experience, you should always, almost always, look inwards instead, inside yourself and inside your team, because the greatest problem we have is that we don't assess and acknowledge what we already have, and our own strengths and our own knowledge and our own resources as individuals and as a team and as an organization. And the limiting belief here is that's holding us back is that we don't want to make errors, and we don't want to make mistakes. So trying to find solutions outside of ourselves is just an escape mechanism, basically, to avoid that. My advice to you is to dare to find the solution within, through reflection, together, basically, in your team. And I promise you, it's there if you just let go of the fear of being wrong. And the third one, this is kind of related to that, is called to act. I need to understand more. And this belief is very closely related, as I said, to the last one. And although, of course, I'm a staunch proponent of fact-based decisions, of a good plan and of logical thinking, obviously, I just wanted to point out that this also can be a strongly limiting idea when it leads to something that I usually call analysis paralysis. That is the belief that you just need this little piece of information, this little piece of knowledge in order to get going. But usually that's false. Usually you know much more than you acknowledge. And the notion holding you back is actually fear of failure. And I call this the knowing-doing gap. And to bridge that gap, you need to acknowledge two things. One thing is that together, we already know enough to get going. And the second one is we won't be able to know what we don't know until we get going. So as a leader, what you should focus on is how to create a psychologically safe environment where it's entirely safe to make mistakes and to make sure everyone is able to speak their mind about what they see and what they know and what they don't know. And so to create a bias for action, coupled with a constant reflection, like, well, you know, whatever, retros or debriefs or whatever you want to call it, and so on. And so you make sure you always do and then learn by doing. And so on to the fourth one. And this, I think a lot of people might find a little, I don't know, it's called nothing is impossible. But how could something so open-minded be a limiting belief? Well, just because it's not true. There are things that aren't possible. And you really should acknowledge that, instead of trying to induce that spirit of positive thinking by saying everything's possible when it's not. This is something that I see as kind of a leadership paradigm. There should always be, well, go-getter, a go-getter, and go just try to do things that are impossible. But I think that makes you feel, in the long run, you feel like a loser because you're not able to do things that are impossible. And a much more true and meaningful way of looking at what's possible is expressed in the so-called serenity prayer. And it says something like, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change what I can, or the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And this makes you understand and constantly challenge the boundaries of your circle of influence without losing that serenity of mind. And I think that's a very good thing, instead of just saying to yourself that nothing is impossible. Next one, number 5. It says, I should have thought of that. And this really is a very limiting belief. This is also known as, I've got to have the best ideas, or I'm supposed to have an opinion as a leader. And this is basically just old thinking. This is just the old paradigm speaking through you. It stems from kind of a Tayloristic mindset where the leader is supposed to be in the know and to know more than the others. And in often used metaphor, you know, that the leader is the head and the others are the hands performing the work. But the paradox is this belief, in effect, is holding back the best ideas from coming forward. No, don't get stuck in this, that you need to be the one presenting the best ideas, constructing the best plans, identifying the worst and most prominent concerns. Instead, take your chance as a leader to make sure, as I said before, there's the climate, of psychological safety, where everyone feels completely free to express their ideas and plans and concerns, and where there is no hierarchy apart from the hierarchy coming from the quality of these ideas and the meaningfulness of them. On to number 6. And this is called, I have to keep my promises. And we often get stuck with different kinds of promises and commitments, things we've said or think we have said, or things that we think others think we've said, okay? Or principles or ideals that we hold dearly and that we feel that we should honor. Otherwise, we experience some kind of ego loss because it's not, well, this is not me. One of the worst that I encounter all the time is the idea that we promise to be and to do what we always have been and always have done. As if there is some kind of inherent promise about ourselves, about the future, just because this is what people expect from us. And this is a mental trap. It's really a mental trap, I'd say, because it makes you focus the wrong things. It makes you focus so much more on the past than on the present and on the future. So your beliefs about expectation and what others will think of you stops you from just acting on the facts that are in reality right now and in the current situation and in the current state, and what you believe is right in the moment, because you kind of get this notion that something else is expected from you. And I mean, all right, keeping promises obviously is a good thing to do, but only as long as you are not letting yourself down by, for instance, living up to someone else's expectations, instead of seeing and acknowledging the situation that is and acting accordingly. So being able to change perspective and choosing to take the right step at the right time is often far more valuable than sticking to what seemed to be the right thing at the beginning. And speaking of which, at the start of this talk, I thought 8 limiting beliefs would be a good number. Now I've learned more, realizing 6 is more than enough for you. So if I were to keep my original promise, I would have lowered the quality of this presentation. So we'll wrap it up here. Wish you good luck on identifying your limiting beliefs and letting them go in order to free your mind and become a better leader. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ola, for taking the time to being a guest lightning talk speaker on this show. Really appreciate it. And so many feelings of recognition here. I have a few questions, if that's okay.
Of course.
If the viewer asks me, recognize oneself in some of these, how can I go about to learn more and hopefully maybe get rid of some of them?
Yeah, actually, I have some books that I strongly would like to recommend. The first one actually is written by my colleague, Joachim Ahlstrom. It's called Suckcess, Free from Fear and Full of Power. The particular spelling here has to do with the fact that you have to really dive into your limiting beliefs in order to really to acknowledge them in order to succeed fully. So this I can strongly recommend. He's written it along with David Hirasawa. So Joachim Ahlstrom and David Hirasawa. That's the first one. And when it comes to recognizing or kind of seeing, identifying these limiting beliefs, I've always been a fan of this guy. I don't know if you know him, but Tim Gallwey, one of the first people to really talk about coaching. And he's very good at this. He's been talking about the tennis ball coming towards you and how to identify that as as a tennis ball that is the actual factual situation and nothing that kind of just happens in you and then makes you go to your go-to behaviors. So this is something that really has to do with this as well. And I talk a lot about psychological safety as well. And this book is called Extreme Teaming by Amy Edmondson. And she's also written a book, and I didn't have it here right now. It's called The Fearless Organization. And I think she's terrific. She's written so much about psychological safety, and how to achieve that. And that, I would say, is one of the main elements in this, how to actually make people able to talk about their limiting beliefs, to be able to fully acknowledge it themselves, that, hey, I'm here and I need to acknowledge this. So yeah,
I'll add a link to all these books in the description below. Next question. Personal one, I guess. Which was the most recent limiting belief that you discover you had yourself in some situation?
Well, actually, it has to do with other people's expectations, I would say. Something about just completely being myself when talking about these things. I tend to have, try to find, as a coach, I mean, one of the main things that you do is try to go to the place where the other person is and try to help them walk away from there. And that, at some occasions, it might turn into me walking to that place and then really not helping them out from there, because I recognize too much of what they see. And to be able to really stand there and say, you really should move. And I know what way you should move. And that's something that I recognize in myself, that I really could be more taking a stand. And that's a limiting belief, that as a coach, I shouldn't be taking a stand, but I should. Because sometimes you're just, I should tell you, as a good friend, I should tell you when you are fooling yourself into believing things that aren't true.
I can recognize myself in that one too. One more question out of curiosity. We both work as consultants, so we get approached by companies and colleagues and leaders who want help. I'm curious, how does it sound like? Because I imagine they don't go, hello, Ola, I have realized that I have limiting beliefs. Can you help me get rid of them? I assume the conversation starts differently.
Yeah, that's right, definitely. Well, usually they come to me with some kind of pain. A phenomenon stemming from the belief in question, and that could be, for instance, well, we're not able to make the people in our organization really engage in continuous improvement or in these change efforts. Why are they not? We've given them all the structure and all the tools they need, but they're just they're not doing it. They're just standing there, and that's a typical situation where people want help from me. And what I typically do is to make them talk about it, basically, in order to really acknowledge for themselves and in front of each other that, hey, this obviously is a limiting belief that we have. And when they found that, I'm just helping them along, basically.
Thank you so much once again for taking the time. And really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for letting me be here. It was really a great opportunity. So thank you, Jimmy, for letting me do this.
You're most welcome. Hope to speak to you soon again. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for watching to the end. And a huge shout out to you who have already become a Patreon. Thank you so much. Patreons can look forward to exciting discussions in the Discord community, early access to videos, and invites to online meetups exclusive for Patreons. Which of these beliefs do you recognize in yourself? I know I have a few to work on. And while we work on them, make sure to explore, have fun, and be safe.